It's rather ironic that we do an episode about coming of age stories because I think most people that know us would say we've never actually hit that mark.
This is Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek.
This is going to be an episode where we discuss some books, some movies, maybe some music that fall within the category of coming of age. The episode concept came from my daughter Anna, who, like me, is I think a sucker for a coming of age movie, and she suggested that we might want to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, let's do it.
So talk about it. Go.
What I did realize is that there's two things that I don't do. One is watch premiere television or whatever the hell it's called.
Prestige.
Prestige. Premiere. Prestige.
I've never watched the first episode of anything.
Yeah, shut up. But the other thing I don't do is read coming of age books. I've watched a lot of movies.
Yeah.
A lot of books. You're gonna have to carry the load on that one, buddy.
Yeah, and what I found in doing a little Googling is that I didn't think I read many coming of age books, but if you Google best coming of age books, turns out a lot of the books I like fall in that category. But I'm with you. My favorite, I guess, format for this kind of story is movies. I love movies about, basically young adults trying to find their way. I think coming of age is a bit of a misnomer because lots of the films I like don't necessarily show them actually, achieving that goal of maturity. But I like the stories of kids, trying to find their way. And obviously, I think we can all relate to that. And everybody's gone through adolescence. Everybody's gone through that period of time where you just question everything you do and you don't know where you're going or how things might turn out, and you're worried about it. And there are just so many great films that have taken that feeling and told an interesting story about it.
I was able to come up with a list. We'll get to it in a second, but for movies, I agree with you. And it's funny, when I think about you, there's two themes that I think of. One is this one, coming of age stories. And the other is, and you've said it in previous episodes, is get the band together.
Yeah, which is they're kind of versions of the same thing, right?
Yeah, they're similar. And the big difference is, of course, that getting the band together can be about older people. Yeah. So those are the things, and there will be episodes that you'll definitely drive, and this will be one of those. But it was good. I had to do some thinking about how I could fit stuff into this, and actually, my playlist pick was one of the hardest ones I've had.
Interesting. Music was a little tougher, I think, for me in this to talk about this particular topic. Films, it was funny. I just kind of came up with a list of things that they're not necessarily secret finds or anything like that. Some of these are movies that have won awards and certainly got fairly widespread play. But the ones that have really affected me the most and most recently, because when you go back to when we were kids watching movies, there were a ton of those kind of movies. I mean, hell, The Goonies could be considered a coming of age movie. The Sandlot, there's all kinds of films that were in the 80s and 90s that fall within that category. But the ones that I came up with for just a kind of short list to talk about were all 2007 or later. And I just think there was a whole crop, particularly right in the late 2000 teens, of really good movies about that subject.
Well, again, I chose a theme, but most of mine are pre-2007, so should be a nice combination of our lists.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through a list of stuff that I thought about. It's really random access, to tell you the truth. A couple of these are probably my favorite in the topic, but some of them I just thought were really, really good and really told this story in a different way. And one of those was the movie Booksmart, which of the movies I picked is the most recent. Did you ever see Booksmart?
I did not.
Directed by Olivia Wilde, who's that actress, like really pretty actress, kind of it girl. I don't think she wrote the movie, and I didn't dig deep enough to find out, but I know she directed it. And I know I don't know if she was married to or seeing Jason Sudeikis before that movie started, or that's when they met. But Jason Sudeikis has a really funny kind of bit role in the movie. But the two stars are two young women who, since 2019, have been in a couple really good films and a couple, I think, some really good TV. Beanie Feldstein is one of them. She's Jonah Hill's sister, and she's the lead. She's the girl who has graduated from high school and has never gone to a party because she was focused on getting into, an Ivy League school. Her best friend is Caitlin Dever, who is gay. Beanie's character is straight. Caitlin Dever is she's been in a bunch of stuff since then, and I think prior to that she was pretty well regarded child actor. But it's just one of those stories. It's set either in LA or in Arizona. It's one of those high schools where there's no hallways, everything's outside. It seems like, but it's just about these two girls who were best friends and hung out together, but didn't really hang out with the popular kids. But the cool thing about the movie is it really turns all of the high school stereotypes on their heads. The stoner skateboarder is going to an Ivy League school or going to Stanford, I think, to play soccer, and it just all the cool kid stereotypes get really turned around, and that's part of the story is these two girls, the two leads, figuring out that they kind of fucked up and that they should have been hanging out with these people, because not only are they, were they having fun, but they were also managing to get into their schools, their dream schools. And meanwhile, these two had locked themselves in the library by themselves, just kind of reinforcing all the stereotypes about, the cool kids or the athletes or whatever. But it's a really good comedy, and it's really well played by those two girls. You really believe them as best friends, and they're just, it's kind of a buddy movie in that way. And it's like a lot of these movies are, it's about their relationship, and as they approach this new thing where they're not going to be together anymore, dealing with that. It's very similar, frankly, to Superbad, which is the male version of the same story, which came out, I don't know, 10, 15 years before that, with her brother, with Jonah Hill playing one of those characters. But it's a great movie, and I really do highly recommend it. The other movies that came out in the teens that I really like were similar. Actually, one of them I'll mention is called Mid-90s, and it's about a kid growing up in mid-90s Los Angeles skateboard culture, or finding it. He was really young. He's like, I don't know, that kid must be like 12 or 13, and he starts hanging out with these older kids who are kind of stoners and partiers, but they're skateboarders. And that one is written and directed by Beanie Feldstein's brother, by Jonah Hill. And it's also a really, really interesting study of life at that time. Apparently, it's at least semi-autobiographical about Jonah Hill and him as that kind of main character trying to hang on and hang out with these again, cool kids, but really, really separate from a school culture of any sort. They are from the outside, they look like a bad influence. And that's part of the story is this kid drinking and doing crazy shit because he starts to hang out with those kids. But it's really also really a good movie. And the actors in it, there's a couple guys that you then see in other movies, after 2018. But at the time, it was really a pretty unknown cast. There was nobody I recognized in terms of either the kids or even the adult actors, now that I think about it. But that's also a great coming of age movie. And one of the actors in that movie was in a movie that came out the year before, in 2017, which is Lady Bird, which was directed by Greta Gerwig. This one got some acclaim. I think it might have gotten a Best Picture nomination for that matter. I don't think it won any Oscars or anything like that, but it had Saoirse Ronan was the kid coming of age, same kind of thing, approaching graduation, really wanting to go to the East Coast to school and get away from, her, where was she? It was either, I think it was Sacramento she lived in. Laurie Metcalf plays her mother, and I think was nominated for a bunch of awards for Best Supporting Actress. And that one is also, it's just a repeat of the story, but it's amazing to me how different directors, different writers can tell the same story in a different way that still you can relate to so well. And I like that movie as well. And that's one I don't think is very well known.
So I saw your list, and you mentioned Cool Kids and other stuff in a couple of your summaries. The only movie on your list that I've seen is Juno. I watched it so long ago that I don't remember hardly anything about it. So I feel like the ultimate uncool kid because you have just I got to start watching some movies or something, man.
Yeah, every single one. So I've got a list of 5 on our outline, and Juno is one of them. And Juno is probably my favorite of those. I watch Juno once a year, I bet. It starred Michael Cera, and again, this one's pretty well known. I know it got some acclaim. I don't know how big its box office was, but I remember it got great reviews. Jennifer Garner was in it. Jason Bateman was in it. J.K. Simmons was fantastic as Juno's dad, dealing with his daughter who becomes pregnant. And again, I believe she's a senior. She might be a junior in high school when this all happens, but she decides to keep the baby, but then to give it up for adoption to a couple, Jennifer Garner and Jason Bateman. And it's all about her decision to do that, and which requires her to go to school visibly pregnant. Meanwhile, her boyfriend is Michael Cera, who's just playing Michael Cera's, the standard Michael Cera character, which means he's kind of shy and goofy, and they're broken up, and it doesn't seem like they actually were really dating when this all happened, but it's a really beautiful story about the relationship of all these people dealing with a teenage pregnancy. And I love that movie. I think it's so good. And like I said, I probably watch it once a year just because I feel that way. But that's a good one. I'm glad you've seen that one. You should watch The Way, Way Back, which came out in 2013. That movie was directed by Nat Faxon and Jim Rash, who also play minor characters in the movie. Jim Rash is the guy who plays the dean in Community, if you've ever seen the TV show
Yes,
Community.
I have seen that.
They are so funny in the little characters they play in the movie. But I was really impressed because I think they wrote and directed it together. Nat Faxon is a guy whose face you'd recognize. He's looks kind of like your standard white guy cast member of Saturday Night Live, but he's been in a bunch of stuff, and he's really funny. But it stars Steve Carell, Toni Collette, and Allison Janney. And I didn't write down the name of the kid who plays the lead, but it's just another one of those things. They're spending like a month in the summer up in oh geez, I wish I could remember where it was. It's like up on the East Coast, just a standard vacation kind of going to the shore for summer vacation type place. And he meets a bunch of people at a water park, starts to work at the water park, and he's a really shy, painfully shy person who doesn't know how to talk to anyone, let alone girls. And he kind of finds himself as he meets these older people who work at the water park. And it really, to me, captures that feeling of being 15 or 16 years old and being in the summer and just trying to figure out who you are. And you should watch that immediately. Whoever's listening to this should go out immediately and go see The Way, Way Back.
I'm listening, so I'll go watch.
There. So that's the one. Who knows? Maybe my parents will watch it. My dad might watch it.
I'll watch Juno again.
So my list turns out to be just kind of mid 2000s, 2000 teens coming of age movies. It sounds like 4 out of 5 you haven't seen, so I think it was worthwhile at least telling you about it. What came to your mind when we talked about doing this as a topic?
Well, I was thinking, I mean, there's movies that we've mentioned that sort of fall into this. There's in previous episodes, not for this topic. I mean, I would argue that even something like Valley Girl is a coming of age because they're high school kids, and
yeah, I agree
with cultural differences. But I've talked about that one probably many times. I did some research. I listened actually to another podcast. There's stuff like The Bodyguard, which I remember watching, and a really cool movie. Breaking Away, which I don't even know if I'm sure I must have seen it. But
dude.
Yeah, I know. Don't give me shit.
That's because it's a bicycle movie too. I love that movie.
I know. Yeah. But if those are like, popular enough to make it onto another podcast, I didn't want to just rehash, what other people might be recommending. So I was trying to think of a theme. And in the last couple months, I went and saw with my two sons, Inside Out 2, which I was not looking forward to seeing at all. I was like, oh fuck, all right, fine, let's go watch. Pixar movie. I didn't like the first one. I thought it was I know a lot of people did, I just didn't. But I really loved the second one. I don't know if it was the experience of just hanging out with my kids, or I thought it was an enjoyable coming of age Disney Pixar movie. And so I decided to go with kids movies. And I tend to like those movies that aren't just kids movies. So the Pixar movies fall into that. I would list any of the Toy Story movies, often dealing with that idea of kids growing up and, you know, moving away from kids and discarding the kids, moving away from toys and discarding the toys. I mean, that's the whole story behind Jessie and Toy Story 2. And then, of course, Toy Story 3 is very sad. Almost
Jesus.
heart-wrenching, but
Yeah.
but really poignant and good. So everyone knows the Toy Story movies, so I won't get into those. So I thought I'd highlight a couple movies that I feel are directed at both adults and kids. And one of my favorite all-time movies is Spirited Away from 2001. And it's about a little girl, 10-year-old girl. I think her name is Chihiro. And her family are moving, and they end up in this really bizarre land where the spirit world, where her parents are turned into pigs, and she has to find her way out of this very, not bizarre is not the word I want to use. What's the word I want to use, Tom? Help me out here.
Very surreal. I haven't.
Surreal. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I would say everything that guy's ever done is very surreal.
I know. And he actually just came out with a new movie, and I read the reviews of it. I forget the name of it. Something in a boy in a wren or something like that. It was just presented at a film festival, and they said that people came out just totally confused. And I was like, it's got to be one confusing ass movie, because most of his movies are, as you said, surreal. But this one struck a nerve from the beginning. I've probably seen it 10 times, although I'm not doing a terrible job of describing the story. But it ends on a very upbeat note and is just one of those uplifting coming of age stories. And it's got enough interesting imagery, and the story is understandable enough to appeal to kids. But I think it's definitely something that appeals more to adults. And that's one of my favorites of his. And then if you really want to
before you move on, I want to ask you
okay.
Just because we didn't mention the director is Miyazaki, right? So
yes,
he's the Japanese animation director. He's famous. My kids love all of his stuff. I've watched a bunch of his movies because of that, and it sounds like that's what your deal was. But do you like his other stuff as well? Like, have you watched The Cat Returns? And I mean, there's a million.
There are, and I do like most of them. The one, I should remember the name of it because it's probably his most famous one. The one about the little teenage witch that I can look up.
I can't remember either, but
it's got something in the style of that even though the movie is really, really good, I never really connected with it as much. So I tend to like some of his stuff that's a little more dark. I think did you find the name yet?
Yeah, I was looking through because he did, he's famous for the Studio Ghibli movies, right? That's the whole thing. And was the one you were talking about, My Neighbor Totoro? Because that's one that always.
No, it's Kiki's Delivery Service.
That's it. Okay, yeah. So those movies, a bunch of those all came out. I guess they came out like late 80s, early 90s, but my kids latched onto them.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked is because I mean, most of his movies have a young protagonist, right? I mean, I think you can argue that many of his movies are coming of age movies for that reason.
Definitely.
And that one, Kiki's Delivery Service, I think is definitely one of those, but there's always tons of tragedy, and like you said, they're surreal as hell. So I find them hard to follow frequently, but man, he's done a lot of work, a lot of good work.
He has. And the ones that are the top of my list would be Spirited Away is probably number one. Princess Mononoke, I think, is number two. And then Ponyo. I didn't think I would like Ponyo, about the little mermaid-ish
What a
character.
weird fucking movie that
I
is.
know
Holy
it was,
shit.
but I really enjoyed it. And you said that your kids grasped onto it and loved them. My kids sort of didn't have a choice. I'm like, hey guys, let's watch this movie, and they'd be like, I'd
I
probably
think
turn
Ponyo was
around.
the first one I ever saw of his, and it was because my daughter Anna had, her friends, and they'd all been watching it, and I got halfway through. I was like, "What the fuck is going on in this movie?" Like I couldn't tell. I had no idea if it was even appropriate for kids because I couldn't figure out what was going on in the first place. So I
So
let them watch it.
who would watch it? What the hell? Also, a Studio Ghibli movie. I don't know if he wrote this one though, and it's an earlier one, and I included it. It's tough, but I had a buddy of mine, who I went to Japan when I was in graduate school, and the tour it was a nuclear studies institute, and we went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We went to the peace festivals, and I think while I was over there, I got this movie. It's called Grave of the Fireflies, and it's a post nuclear war. It's about, I think, a brother and a sister trying to survive all that came from, the aftermath of the nuclear strikes. It's kind of hard to watch for obvious reasons,
Yeah.
but it's a very, very good movie. More of a historical document, I would argue, a relic, but also in the end worth watching. So
Yeah.
I'll go that far. So I'm going to totally shift in the tone of my stuff and go with the one non-animated one that I put on the list is Big Fat Liar from 2002, I believe. It stars, yeah, it's 2002. It stars Paul Giamatti as the bad guy, and Frankie Muniz as the big fat liar. So basically, the premise is the kid lies all the time. His parents are really upset with him. He says he won't lie anymore. He has to go to summer school, and he writes an essay, a story, and I forget how it ended up with it. But basically, Paul Giamatti is a struggling filmmaker, can't come up with a good story. He steals the kid's premise, turns it into a blockbuster movie, and Frankie Muniz's character is telling everyone he stole my story, and everyone's like, "Just stop, dude! You're lying again." So his whole thing is to prove to his dad, especially, that he didn't lie, and that involves getting back at Paul Giamatti and trying to make him admit that he stole the story. And it's so juvenile. Frank, it's my friend at work. Tom talked about, well, I said Frankie. So Tom talked about the fact that it's funny that we're doing coming of age movies because we haven't, arrived at that point yet. One of the funniest scenes is when Paul Giamatti's character's skin is turned blue. And all the hijinks that result from that. I would recommend just watching the traffic light scene. It's hilarious. But Paul Giamatti is his typically good self. It seemed like he seemed like he really enjoyed playing this character. It seemed like a movie that was probably a little bit below him, but he played it for all it was worth. And it's one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies.
Yeah.
Good coming of age movie that I think fits the theme very nicely.
Yeah, so you basically talked about 5 movies, and I've only seen, well, I guess it's not fair. I've seen all the Toy Story movies, which you talked about kind of in general, and those are all, God, those are tear jerkers. Every single one. I think was it Toy Story 3 you were talking? Was Toy Story 3 the one where they're all like holding hands as they're going down the conveyor? But
Yeah.
Oh my God, I was sitting next to my kids, sniffling and trying not to cry. That was just horrible. It was a great movie. I love that series. So I've seen that, but I've seen Spirited Away, but I haven't seen Inside Out 2. I liked the first one a lot. I thought it was really good. And I have not seen Big Fat Liar, and I'm a huge Paul Giamatti fan, so I'm going to have to dig that one out.
Yeah, go watch it just for that. I mean, it's not quality film, but it's entertaining.
The other type of media that likes to cover coming of age stories, of course, is books, fiction, novels in particular. And when I started thinking about what books I've read that are coming of age, I couldn't think of one. And so, as usual, I jumped online and just looked for a list on Google. And I found a list that included a bunch of books that I've read and didn't really realize could be considered coming of age books. And one of them was All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. I've talked about All the Pretty Horses. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And I guess technically it is, because the kids that cross the border from Texas into Mexico that are described throughout this book are young men who are, searching for what they want to do with their lives. But I never, I guess that would never have occurred to me that it was basically a coming of age story. The Catcher in the Rye, of course, does occur to just about anybody who's gone to high school, because we all had to read it. That's a great coming of age story. But there are a couple others that I've read that were on this list that I would just throw out there as interesting books. One is Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward. She's an amazing writer, and as soon as I saw it on the list, I was like, oh yeah, well that makes sense. That's definitely about a kid trying to deal with the tough circumstances of his life, and all the interrelationships that are involved in getting him from point A to point B. And there's a book by Colson Whitehead, who's an author I've recommended in the past, called Sag Harbor, which is kind of just a more dramatic, serious version of the story in The Way Back, about going to a beach house for summer vacation and dealing with people and humans, and how you want to grow up to be somebody that actually makes an impact on people. So those are all good books that I didn't really think about as being coming of age stories, that at least according to the internet are.
I saw the same lists and I didn't read as many of those. I mean, I of course read Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah, I couldn't avoid that.
No, and I've read a lot of sci-fi, and I'm sure there are characters. I know for a fact that there are characters within books that are, the theme that runs through. Because we all like those books where there's 4 or 5 different threads running through, and sort of rotate reading them through. But the one that's interesting that showed up, and I'm going to mention it because it's like 1,000 fucking pages and I finally read it, was Dune. I mean,
right. Yeah.
Dune is, yes, he's a very special coming of age character, soon to be a horrible tyrant. But
but that's still, he's found who we wanted to be.
He's coming. Yeah. He is coming of age. And I know I've said him, so I don't really want to get into it too much, but Robert McCammon, when he was still writing quote unquote horror books, Boy's Life is definitely a coming of age in the South, set back in the 1960s. So it brings in civil rights and all the other changes that are happening. I would argue it's one of his better books. I've read that. There's another book called The Listener, which is about a young kid who has a special skill where he can actually hear other people's thoughts. Also set in the 60s, interestingly enough. There's some race issues in that one. I would think that's on the edge of a coming of age story. But other than the classics, and I've read, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man.
Oh, yeah.
Which I read for school and love that book, but it's also a very obvious one. So yeah, I've certainly read a number of coming of age books, many classics, some not so much.
Well, like the Hinton books, right? I mean, we talked a lot about The Outsiders, for example. That's
yes.
I think that's an example of, or yeah, I think it falls in that category. It can be a pretty broad category, I suppose.
It can be, but I mean, I think what I really want to focus on is the fact that this is your bailiwick. Just because I wanted to say that. I wanted to say that word.
Yeah, well, you've said bailiwick now. I think we can put that one away.
All right, that's fine. I'll move on to the next book next word in my thesaurus. So, all right, I'm going to spring one on you. We have a question from Jonathan, and I haven't told you what it is.
All right. All right, Jonathan, what do you have to say for yourself?
So Jonathan is writing in from Unalaska, Alaska. With this being our penultimate episode, there's the next word of my thesaurus.
Perfect.
Of season 4, Jonathan wants to know what sort of topics we have planned for season 5. Or will there be a season 5?
Maybe a better question. A much, much better question. So that, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go. I said penultimate. Your turn.
I'm done. I said penultimate. What else? What do you want from me? Well, Jonathan, that's an interesting question. Thank you for asking. I can tell you that we have discussed a bunch of different topics. We're getting other suggestions from listeners, and I think in the coming seasons and episodes, we want to talk about horror books, horror movies. Basically, that will be an episode that Chris will have to shoulder the burden on because I'm very scared of watching horror movies or reading Stephen King books or anything like that. So that's one. We hope to have some more guests, and we'll reveal those later on down the line. We've got a couple thoughts about other episodes to discuss music, and we've talked about one-hit wonders. We may want to talk about artists that are maybe overrated or underrated, artists that we love that have put out shitty work on occasion. I think we have a couple television topics that we want to talk about, things like sitcoms and game shows, that kind of thing. Hopefully some stuff that people are interested in coming back to listen.
Yeah, we're hoping to have a special episode focusing on sci-fi television and the science behind it. And then one that we're flirting with, and this might become a recurring theme, is choosing a year from when we've been alive, and focusing on popular culture from that year. So I think an obvious one for both of us would be 1984. We both graduated from high school, so we can talk a little bit about what we were doing, how we were planning for college, and
failing to plan.
Or failing to plan. But interesting because that's right before Tom and I first met. And there's some classic hair metal from 1984, so that should be one hell of a show.
Yeah, that'll be a good listening show for those of you who long for the days of long bleach blonde hair.
And I think there's a very good chance that we will have part 4 of our drinking story. Oh, and we're hoping to do a drinking episode.
That's right. That's right.
The one.
We're a little nervous, but we think we want to do an episode where we've got an evening where the two of us can crack open a beer and talk for an hour or so and see what comes out of our mouths. So you definitely want to come back for that one. Yes.
So those are just some of the topics, Jonathan, that we're planning. If you have other ideas, send them our way. Should be another fun season. So, yeah. And you gave me the chance to say penultimate 3 times.
Yeah, email us if you have topics or thoughts about episode topics for us. You can email us at thirdsongin@gmail.com. So let's talk recommendations. What do you think?
I think that's a good idea. How about I go first? Because mine is one that this may be the favorite outcome of this topic is it seems like a really easy topic because, as you said, a lot of stuff can be crammed into the coming of age theme. Mm-hmm. But I struggled with coming up, especially with music. So I did want to try to stick with pre-2000. And so I was doing some research and I came across a band that I have tried many times to get into. And so I did some research on their albums, listened to their stuff again, and decided to recommend one of their albums. And that album is There's Nothing Wrong with Love, the 1994 release by the band Built to Spill. Alternative band, I think very well respected. And I would argue never really broken into that next level. This album is loosely a concept album about growing up. And, I think let me get his name real quick. Sorry. It's basically a one-man band, Doug Martsch, Marstch. And he'd always planned that the band would be a rotating cast of characters other than him. So for every album, every tour, his plan was to be the only, constant member of the band, which I don't know that struck me. I mean, I guess it's good for change and not sounding the same, but I knew that and never gravitated towards him. But I've listened to that album now 4 or 5 times over the past week prepping for this, and it's a really I've already used the word poignant. Damn it, where's my thesaurus? It's a very it's well worth a listen. Let's just go with that. The song that's probably best known off this album is the song Twin Falls. And it harkens back to Idaho, which is where he grew up. There's a great article from Ultimate Guitar magazine called 30 Years Later, This Indie Rock Masterpiece is Still the Most Underrated Album of the 90s. I'll go ahead and put that link on our website.
Yeah.
That's why I went back and listened to it. And that popped up, which is great about Google. That popped up. So I started to read the story, and it's all about, this idea of growing up and being the theme behind that album. So I'm like, all right, someone's telling me that I should make this recommendation. So I am. So once again, it's Built to Spill's 1994 album, There's Nothing Wrong with Love.
What do you think you'd rate this?
Oh, yes. I think what I would do is use egg burritos with sour cream as a scale.
Interesting.
And even though he said it's one of the most underrated albums, for me, I'm going with 4 out of 5. I can see the appeal of the album. It's still not a band that I'm going to be able to listen to repeatedly. I could probably find a song or two that I could do that, but I'll be interested in your take on it, because I don't think it's something that you're going to like.
Yeah, I'm going to take a listen when we finish recording. My recommendation for coming of age is yet another film. I could talk about these kinds of films probably for 3 straight episodes and still come up with more movies. This one is well known, probably doesn't need a recommendation. On the other hand, it's older than I realized. From 1993, the film Dazed and Confused by director Richard Linklater. I'm a huge Linklater fan. He's done all kinds of interesting work. I've talked, actually, he made a kind of spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused that we talked about when we were talking about, I think it was sports movies, maybe, I don't remember, but there's a movie called Everybody Wants Some, which is also set, it's kind of a historical document, as you said earlier. But Dazed and Confused is about on the last day of school in 1976. It's really about 2 categories of kids in that high school: the ones that are graduating. Well, no, 3 really, because there's some graduates, but it's really the ones that are juniors that are going to be seniors, and they're hazing the 8th graders that are going to be freshmen the following year. And it's set in Texas, and it's having basically grown up in that period of time. I don't remember that kind of hazing in the high schools that I went to, but I remember that kind of attitude. And I swear, like I said, it came out in 93, so it is really a then type of recommendation, but it's about the class of 1976 of this Texas high school. And, for me personally, I would have probably been in 5th or 6th grade, I think, at that point. So I was younger. But man, when I watch that movie, it always feels like when I was in high school. And again, I went to 2 different high schools. It felt like both of them. He had this kind of universal way of describing these kids, and it was a bunch of unknown actors. They were unknown at the time anyway. And you can relate to almost every single character, because at certain points in your life you feel like just about every one of them, whether it was a popular kid or a football player or the kid who's going to be a brand new freshman and is nervous about starting that next stage of their life. It's just really well done from start to finish. This is another movie I watch at least once a year, and I have to give it 5 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream. I love that movie, and I will always love just the way he captures that feeling, particularly if you grew up in the 70s and 80s. He captures it just perfectly.
I 100% agree with you on everything you said, and that doesn't happen often. So
yeah, no kidding. I mean, Linklater's good at this kind of coming of age thing. Even Everybody Wants Some. It's about kids coming into college, but it still gives you that sense of kids at a different stage, but still trying to figure out how they're going to be adults and how they're going to deal with college. He wrote and directed the movie Boyhood, which is famous because it was kind of a gimmicky movie where he followed the actors for, I think, 10 years and literally watched a kid come of age, grow from being a little kid, like a 10 or 12-year-old, until he was leaving high school. That's also a great movie. It's a little long, and I think it got mixed reviews, whereas I think pretty much every reviewer has loved Dazed and Confused. That's a great one.
I went to an all boys Catholic high school, Jesuit high school, so I couldn't relate completely, but all my buddies went to the local public school, and I definitely could. I mean, I lived vicariously with some of their stuff through them. So, but even going to school, I did. I mean, same thing. You have the geeks and the athletes and all. I mean, all the stuff that he captured so well in that movie.
Well, and even the production design, like I said, everybody dresses exactly like. I went to John Marshall High School in West Virginia until I was a junior, and I watch those kids and I see the way they're dressed, and it's exactly what I picture when I think back when I was a freshman, sophomore in high school. It was uncanny. What a great job he did with that.
All right, Thomas, from recommendations to fuck ups. That takes us to post facto.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
I kept this on the outline only because I can't think of a damn thing to bring up for post facto, and that never happens to me.
I got one for you.
Oh, good. The shoe is on the other foot, motherfucker.
Oh no, this shoe's on your foot, buddy.
God damn it! I knew that's what was going to happen. Yeah,
this was perfect. So Andy just texted us about our one-hit wonder episode. He said that Tom's definition of a one-hit wonder is a song that I think could be a hit, and he wonders when they might have another one. Probably not worthy of an ex post facto, but still not a good definition.
You know what? let me respond. Hey, Andy, fuck off. And it's post facto. It's not ex post facto, by the way.
He does say ex post facto, doesn't he?
He did in the episode, and I was like, well, you know what? He contributes way too much for me to quibble with him about that.
Well, but if we can get a fuck you out to Andy, then this has been a successful episode.
Absolutely, we could stop right now if we wanted. I would be completely happy with that. But
all right,
I hope he tuned in for this one. Are you ready for staff picks?
I am ready for staff picks.
Just around the corner from you.
So this one actually suggests, back to Jonathan's question, another future episode of Third Song In, which is, and there should be a big exclamation point after this because I don't have the voice to show excitement, Canada. So we need to do an episode on Canadian TV, Canadian movies, Canadian music. And with that last one in mind, my staff pick for this week is a single released by a Canadian songwriter, Ryan Harris. The song is This Path Alone. Andy will be happy because it's a nice, slow, sad song.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's about a broken up relationship and the struggles with this. He is walking down this path alone, looking back on what he left behind. So, and the song itself is really solid. He's released, and he typifies a lot of the stuff we've talked about with music. He has like 2 or 3 EPs released, an album released, and they all have the 2024 date. And then he just released this song, which is also obviously 2024. It's not on any of those others. So he's just pushing out new material, and almost all of his stuff is from the last year. But so that's one reason I picked him. The other reason I picked him is I love someone who has a sense of humor. And I want to read to you all his biography on YouTube Music. Ryan Harris is a Canadian filmmaker and musician making music from his bedroom makeshift studio in Whistler, Canada. Ryan is also the guy writing this bio in third person to make it seem like he has a team. But really, it's just me in my DIY studio making songs. Haha. Anyways, back to third person. In 3 years, Ryan's original music has amassed over 70 million streams across all platforms. So I thought that's funny. So
that is very funny. That's really good. That's awesome.
That's my staff pick. Ryan Harris, This Path Alone.
You've mentioned it already, and you've mentioned the primary appeal here, but I just want to read what you wrote in the outline, which was This Path Alone, single by Ryan Harris from 2024. He's Canadian. That's all it said. I was like, all right, that's
I'm telling you, I got a thing about Canada somehow.
You do, man. I'm surprised you haven't just packed up and moved to Ottawa. My staff pick for this episode is an album a posthumous album made by Justin Townes Earl. It came out earlier this year. It's called All In, Unreleased and Rarities. I don't know. We've never really talked about this, but I love these kind of albums, the Rarities album. This one's a little sad because it's a guy who passed away. But they've just collected a bunch of his demos, a bunch of his live performances, like on Sirius XM. And Justin Townes Earl, we've talked about before. He's Steve Earle's son. He was very much a different type of artist, and he had become, for me, a singer-songwriter that, frankly, I listen to more and enjoy more than Steve Earle himself. And I'm a big Steve Earle fan, so I think that's saying a lot. But this album is well worth the listen. It's mostly just songs that he had put out on other albums. I'm sure they're just outtakes or acoustic tracks or click tracks from as he was preparing to put out some of his other recorded work. But he does a live version of Champagne Corolla, which is a great song of his. There's some cool covers on this album. He covers Glory Days with Springsteen song. He covers Graceland, the Paul Simon song. Just for those two, frankly, this album is worth getting and listening to. He covers Rocket 88, which is an old tune. I don't even know who originally put that out. He has the kind of voice and style that really lends itself to just him on a kind of staticky microphone. And that's what a lot of this stuff is just clearly him sitting somewhere, probably in his own living room with an iPhone recording something, because he's practicing to put it on an album. I love that kind of stuff. And in particular, this one really hits home, I think, just because, as we've talked about before, we're not getting anything new from him. So it's kind of neat to at least hear other takes or other versions of songs that I've heard him play that I like so much. So I'm recommending All In, Unreleased and Rarities from Justin Townes Earl. It's subtitled The New West Years. I think that was his original label. I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. But anyway, in some ways it's a money grab by the label, but it is good work, and it is it's really interesting and fun to listen to this album.
Yeah, I also love those types of albums. And in this case, I agree. It's whatever the label's purpose is, it's some great material for fans of Justin Townes Earl. And
ready to give some playlist picks?
I am. And I'm going to enjoy this one too. It's as much of a story behind this one as there is the song itself.
Cool. Well, I'll keep my end a little short, so you've got room to tell the story. I did have a runner-up, a song from 2015 called 7 Years by Lucas Graham. I think that was a really popular song for a really short period of time, but I loved it. I really think it was cool. And God, if there's a coming of age song, it's 7 years, because he literally just talks about him at different ages as he gets older and then becomes a rock star, I guess, is the end of that song. But the one that I always think of when I think of music and coming of age, actually the band I always think of, is Gear Daddies.
Yep.
Those guys. The lead singer of that band, Martin Zeller, he made his entire early career on coming of age stuff and just lamenting, being a Midwest kid and having nothing to do. The song is 1990s Sonic Boom by Gear Daddies. And it was on the Billy's Live Bait album. If there's a song that captures how I felt when I was, 13 years old during summer vacation, didn't have a summer job, I don't think, that summer, didn't have anything to do until August when football practice started. And it's like one of the lines, in fact, maybe the opening line is summer vacation, nothing on TV, no one's home except for me. And the way he sings it, and the tone of his voice as he sings that line and the rest of that song, that was just me in the summers when I was 11, 12, 13 years old. And I really love that song, and I've been looking for an excuse. I was worried about putting a Gear Daddy song on the playlist because I know we've got one on an earlier playlist. But first of all, much earlier, season 1. And second of all, I didn't pick it. It was you. So I think I'm okay.
Sorry, this is my episode where I'm telling tangential stories. Boom. Man, that thesaurus is active today.
Holy shit!
Tangential.
What is that smoke behind you? Is that your thesaurus on fire?
um, so I also love the Gear Daddies completely. It's a band Tom turned me onto, and the song I remember on that same album, I think, "Stupid Boy,"
Oh, yes.
which is another great song,
Ah.
also semi coming of age. But I put that on a playlist for my former brother-in-law. I saw him like at a holiday gathering, and he's like, I love that song, "Stupid Whore," and I'm like, it's "Stupid Boy." But when you hear him sing it, if you don't listen closely enough, it does sound like "Stupid Whore."
I don't
You're
know,
just
man. That
another
might say
stupid
more.
whore.
That might say more about the listener than the song.
So I thought that was really funny. So the fact that you brought up another Gear Daddy song got
I
me
did
back to that
consider,
story.
yeah, I considered that song for my selection too, because I feel it's just this exact same vibe as Sonic Boom. That whole album has that vibe,
Yeah.
truthfully. But
All right. So this band actually probably was only able to put out about as many albums as the Gear Daddies. And I distinctly remember you listening to this when I bought the album. And if I recall, you wanted to like it more than you did. I went with the lead song off the 1990 album by the band The Sidewinders. The album's name is Anti Ramos's Pool Hall. Their debut or premiere, if you want to go with that album, was Witch Doctor, 1989. I think in the end it had a song that ended up being their most popular song. This album did not chart, unlike the first one. But the lead song, "We Don't Do That Anymore," is one of my favorite songs of all time. And but same thing, you go through the album, there's a lot of stuff that takes you back to either college days or high school days. There's a song called "Sarah's Not Sober," about a girl that got drunk at a party. He needs to make sure that she makes it home okay. 7 + 7 =, and it's just a feel good sort of taking you back to your youth type of album is what I think this one is. The reason I chose it is, one, the song perfectly fits our theme, but two, it also fits a theme Tom and I have been talking about for a while about music and the financial side of things and what record labels do. You talked about what the motivation may have been for Justin Townes Earle's previous label, but the Sidewinders just sort of disappeared after this album, and me being one who always follows the same bands, I was disappointed because I thought they were right on the precipice of, boom, another great word, hitting it big. I thought that this album was right there where they were about to put out a great album. And I think this is a really good album and not a great one. And they just disappeared. And I'd heard at one point that they changed their name to Sand Rubies. And I think an album came out 2 or 3 years later. It wasn't nearly as good. And I sort of forgot about them. But they've just reunited for 30 plus years together. They are again calling themselves the Sidewinders, and the stories come out. So they basically got sued by a band in North Carolina. They were a cover band that already had the name Sidewinder, so they weren't
oh.
allowed to use it anymore. That all got held up in court for a couple years. They finally decided to call themselves Sand Rubies. They recorded, but the lead singer said that it just sort of lost all the momentum. It was just they never felt that was who they were. They ended up breaking up. They got together recently. Like you said, they've reclaimed the name Sidewinders. And they basically said, we don't care if they sue us. We got nothing. Like, if they want to sue us, the Sidewinders want to send us a cease and desist, they can. And then they've re-released all their music. But what's interesting is it's basically, they don't own the rights to their music. So I think it's RCA could sue them. These are basically bootleg releases of their own material, which is a sad statement. And they also said, if RCA wants to sue us, they can. They said, we've been writing to them for years, offering to buy our music back so that we have the rights to it, and they've never responded. So they're like, well, maybe this will get them to respond. So I have always loved that album. I know, if I recall, and it's around the time that car caught on fire in the back of our apartment, you talked about how much you wanted to like that album, but never did. You like the concept behind it, but not the overall execution of that album. And I agree. I think it's a really good album that's waiting for a great album. And unfortunately, the Sidewinders got sidetracked by legalities.
Yeah, that's a crazy story, and it is unfortunate when you got, a band that's creating, original work and just, wants to perform and they can't get any help from anybody.
I know.
Although weird to me that a group of people that came up with Sidewinders as a name, which I think is really cool, because Sand Rubies is awful.
Yeah, I know.
Like you'd think they could come up with something better than Sand Rubies. I'm sure there's some personal meaning to that somehow, and I'm sure a sand ruby is something that I ought to know, and that it's a reference, but it doesn't roll off the tongue. Sidewinders is a much better name.
And I don't think so. They abandoned the name as quickly as they could. So they just wonder if, is there a list somewhere of names that are available so you won't be sued? And Sand Rubies was in it. So no one wants that name. Yeah, nobody.
We did think about naming this podcast Sand Rubies.
Yes, we did.
We did.
That was fourth or fifth on our list.
It was close. It got into the conversation. Third Song In is recorded in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and Joliet, Illinois. You can get in touch with us at thirdsongin@gmail.com. Please email us with your questions, comments, episode topic suggestions, responses to our picks or recommendations or conversation in general. Please follow us, rate and review us wherever you listen to our podcast. Give us all of your stars. Listen to our playlist, our companion music playlist on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcast, or Apple Music, I guess. I'm missing one. YouTube Music. Our playlist for this season is called Third Song In, Season 4. Seasons 1 through 3 are also on those streaming services. You can download those. You can follow those. You can, I think, rate them on at least some of the streamers. Please do that for us.
I thought you could say you could listen to our companion podcast, and I was very curious as to what you were going to recommend.
Fourth Song In.
You listen to it. The Third Song In doesn't work.
We have a Third Song In re-listen podcast called Fourth Song In, where we listen to the Third Song In episodes and comment over them.
Oh, God. All right. Check out our website, thirdsonginpodcast.com. I'm on it right now. You can go directly to our blog, which Tom and I put out every Thursday. We have direct links to all the playlists on the streaming services that Tom just so eloquently. So the source doesn't help if you can't pronounce a fucking word.
We also have a Facebook page. That's a good place to get in touch with us. We try to post updates there as frequently as we can. You've been listening to Third Song In with Chris and Tom. Thanks for listening.
I'm on it right now. You can listen to a blog that Tom and I put out. Oh, son of a bitch. I forgot to put the blog out this morning.
Plus, you can't listen to it unless you want us to read it to you. That's Fifth Song In. Please listen to our blog reading podcast, Fifth Song In, on Spotify.
Let's knock this motherfucker out.
Knock it out, knock it out, knock it out. I should have been a backup singer.